That was for the recording. All right. Good evening and welcome to tonight's Monroe City Council meeting. This is the special study session meeting for Tuesday, October 21st, 2025. The time right now is 6 p.m. I'm going to go ahead and ask that our clerk call the roll.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members present and establishing a quorum are council members Hanford, Fisher, Walker, Fulcher, Scarborough, and that's it.
All right, thank you. And so we are missing Councilmember Beaumont. Okay, so Councilmember Beaumont is absent today, and also we heard from Councilmember Gamble. He also will be absent today, so unless there's objection, we will consider their absences as excused. All right, seeing no objection, we'll go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. Councilmember Scarborough, will you please lead us in the pledge? Thank you. I pledge my allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening is public comments. Anybody from staff want to comment? Staff, AKA our officer, would you like to comment? You sure? We could do a dance. It'd be fun. Okay. Okay, there is nobody here that is signed up to comment or provide comment, so I won't go into the script on that today. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. That is item number 5.1. This is under announcements and presentations. 2024 Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee, JLARC report on public records with Sherry Simonson and Patricia Pendry. Good evening, you two.
Good evening. We're back again. So we're here to present tonight our yearly JLARC report, and we wanted to alert you that the actual report that we submitted was attached to your agenda bill, but we're going to go through our PowerPoint tonight. And we just wanted to start off to say thank you for your support over the past few years that we've given this presentation. Really appreciate your interest in what we're working on. And so we hope to give you some good information tonight. Next slide. So one of the things I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit tonight is, as this is somewhat of an unfunded mandate, kind of where did this all start? And so this started in 1972 when we had a Washington Public Disclosure Act, and that's what created the PDC, the Public Disclosure Commission. So that is about campaign finances, public records, and transparency, and all that kind of came together back in 1972. And so the people of the state, it says in our RCW that they don't yield their sovereignty to the agencies which serve them. The people, in delegating the authority, do not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. Next slide. So why that matters is, along with Imagine Monroe, that statement is what guides us in our decision-making and how we proceed and how we handle our records requests, how we handle public records, and the decisions that we make, because we feel it's really important to provide good customer service to all the people we encounter, whether they're residents outside the city. But again, customer service is really important to us. So back in 2017, the JLARC, go ahead, you can switch. They created this, they needed to understand what was actually happening. Cities and agencies were kind of identifying, this demand. And so we didn't have any information or statistics to kind of support what those, what was being said basically. And so that's what started this. And so we've been participating since day one. So we've been reporting for several years now. And so basically it's 15 metrics, which was again attached in your agenda bill. And it, really tries to figure out what is the cost, what's staff time, what are response times looking across the statewide. Next slide. So I'm providing 2023 comparisons, even though we just submitted the 2024 report, and that's what we're talking about tonight. But the state hasn't quite caught up with it because we just submitted those within the last 6 months. So I thought it would be kind of interesting so you can kind of see some statewide information. So 230 agencies submitted data, which meant about 1,700 agencies did not. And the way that they can do that is if they indicate that they don't spend over $100,000 in public records or records management. Statewide, there were 487,000 public records requests, and about $6.4 million was spent in litigation. Agencies received statewide an average of 1,900 requests per month, and we were at about 1,536. So we're very close to the state average. Cities and towns received the most requests, which is about 40% of all the requests were cities and towns. So obviously that means that we're an impacted agency. Most common requesters were individuals, 40%. Monroe was 33. So again, we're kind of lining up with what we're seeing in the state. Monroe closed about 1,500 requests, and statewide was closed 417,924 requests. Next slide. We always like to share kind of what is happening in penalties, so you understand how impactful it could be to our general fund if we have a penalty. So here's just a short few examples: $820,000, 290, 884, and we're happy to, again, report we have no penalties and no litigation. Next slide. So here we kind of wanted to give you kind of a 5-year review of where we at. And as you can see, we had that kind of jump in 2023. And then we kind of went down a little bit in 2024. We're down a little bit, about 60. But as a kind of a projected year to date, based on kind of what we've been doing for this year, we might be around 1,600 for 2025. And so one of the things that Patricia and I kind of talked about is, why did we kind of have that dip? And one of the things that we noticed is with our police lobby being closed, there's a lot of citizen contact that comes in and says, hey, I need a collision report. I need this report. And so it's possible that that kind of impacted people reaching out to us. So again, obviously now that we're kind of got our doors open again, we could potentially see this kind of 1,600 increase. We also did see that some law firms would say, hey, we need these additional records, but we've already received our collision report from the State Patrol. So people did have another resource to get that information, but of course we want to provide the service to our residents and best we can. Next slide. So here we did kind of like a quarterly search of like, what does it look like month by month? And as you can see, the green, that is our 2025. So you can kind of see that's, you know, kind of creeping up again. 2023, there were similar numbers. And again, we did see a little bit of a decrease in 2024. Next slide, please. Types of requesters. So here is kind of a breakdown of what we have, who's requesting what the records. And I kind of highlighted in red where we see a little bit of a difference. As you saw, we were kind of mimicking the state in a lot of numbers, but here's a little bit of difference. So you can see 24% compared to 9%. And again, we have 3 highways that merge into our town. So obviously our numbers are our collision reports are gonna impact our numbers there. Government agencies, we track when other agencies make requests to us for in background investigations, because again, they're basically asking, do we have any records? So it's possible that that kind of might increase our numbers there. And again, organizations, we do have a lot of companies reaching out to us for information as well. Next slide. So we always like to kind of give you just a little peek at behind the scenes what we're doing. So both Patricia and I have an example for you tonight. One example for City Hall is we had a request that took 12 months. It took coordinating 9 staff members, 4 departments, 37 hours to complete. It involved electronic records, emails, and hard copy records that had to be scanned. Multiple databases had to be searched. There were 9 installments, and I had to do 3 email smart pulls. And the reason I have to do 3, I make a pull, and then as I review those records, I realize we could have missed some based on not having some of this other information. So I'm going to rerun the search and add those new elements. And then I'm going to rerun it again, potentially, as I find out more information. So as there are clues that happen, I kind of have to follow down those clues, and that's what would bring me to have 3 searches. I'll let Patricia go ahead and talk about hers.
So I selected a case that involved really complex litigation issues. It took us 14 months to complete 15 installments. Eventually, the requester actually abandoned the request, and the majority of the records were basically the case file, all the records attached to that, and emails. And 3 staff members were involved in producing these records. There are really complex issues associated with these case files. In this particular case, there were a lot of juveniles and witnesses, so there's a lot of confidentiality issues where we have to be very careful to redact names and identifiers. And this case was so complex that we even had to create a spreadsheet of names to indicate what their status was, to ensure that as we were going through these records, we were making appropriate redactions. And we would frequently have to go back to the detectives involved in the case to just verify and make sure that we were processing the records carefully. And so we spent over 80 hours on this particular request.
Next slide. So while this is not a particularly a JLARC statistic, we feel that it's kind of important to kind of have you kind of get a glimpse of what we're facing, what might be our potential. So these are what we call requests that tend over month to month. So we have requests coming in, we have requests going out, but then at the end of the month, there's a number that are going to carry over into the next month. And so as you can see, you know, in 2024, in May, we had 28, and now we have 62. So why is that? Why do we have that? And it's because the requests are more complex, because we have body cameras now, and they have very lengthy redactions. And Patricia is going to talk a little bit more about that. But the number of records we might be reviewing, the complexity of the redactions that might need to be made, all of that causes us to have these what we call carryovers month to month. So
And if I could add
Yes.
one other thing that impacts that, at least what we've experienced at the police department, we've had requesters that are making 3, 4, or 5 requests at the same time. And so, you know, we're working on one request at a time. We let the requesters know that we have to prioritize these. We work on one at a time. And so it's going to carry over that second or third request, because we can't start working on that one until we've completed the first one.
And that is because we have a policy, and this is something we're going to be kind of watching case law on. But if you are a requester and you make multiple requests, we'll let you pick which one you want to go first, but we're going to work at one at a time. That way other people have a chance to get their records requests responded to as well. Again, the landscape might change on that up in the future, but right now that's kind of how we process our requests. Next slide. Okay, great. So again, even though we have that slight decrease, as you can tell, the total number of requests by department kind of stayed the same from, there's a question.
Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Scarborough. Sorry.
The one at a time issue is based on staff members available to work on it?
No, it's our city policy that if one person makes 6 public records requests at the same time, we're going to work on one.
Right.
And then until that one's complete, we're not going to start the second one.
But you may be working on my request and his request.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, we are working on multiple at the time.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, of course.
Any other questions? All right, go ahead.
So again, the number differs from our JLAC report because, you know, that counts the number of requests, but we have multi-department requests. So Patricia and I frequently talk daily because we have requests that cross over. I have records, she has records. I'm getting records from Parks, Public Works. So we're pulling all these departments. So we track that so we kind of know where the requests are landing, and so we can be sure that we're supporting those departments. Next slide. So here's some of our statistics. The average cost of our request has gone up. to $251 compared to $223. And I wanted to point that out because again, body cameras have impacted what we are doing. And so that number has gone up because our requests are taking longer to complete. Body camera redaction is very time intensive. So again, this is just an average, but we just kind of want to let you know that's something that we're kind of up against. 1,000 of our requests, a little over 1,000 were closed within 5 days, and 268 were closed that took more than 5 days to complete. And again, that's from the complexity redactions and things that need to happen. Again, we're happy to show that we have an 83% closure rate in 5 days. So again, we really work hard to try to get people records as quickly as possible. And the statewide average is 57%. Thank you. Next slide. So we thought this was kind of an interesting jump that we wanted to show you. Is this is directly from the JLARC. So this is a snip from their data set that they provide to all of us. And if you look at the costs that are recovered from requesters, they're running, 194,000, 336,000. Well, in 2023, it jumped up to $1,900,000. And again, one of the things that we're trying to interpret what that looks like, we think a lot more agencies are adopting fee schedules similar to what Monroe has. And we also know that because of the legislature, how they design the body camera laws, we were able to charge for staff time to do those reductions. So it's not uncommon for a $200 to $400 bill to be asked for staff to complete it. So we are seeing some reimbursements there. So I just wanted to kind of point that out. But yeah, as you can see, everything kind of is creeping up. Cost for fulfilling records, cost to manage records.
I gotcha.
Yes.
Nope, go ahead, finish
Oh,
what you're
okay.
saying, yeah.
So anyway, so back to where we are. Last year we are fulfilling our records. We were at around 500,000 because we had all of our public records roundup days. We had staff, when we did our big move. So we're back down to around 383,000, and that's for staff time. That's for our next request program. That's for legal review. It's for our redaction software. And then we apply an overhead rate, which is very customized, for IT, copier, paper, all of those things. So those are kind of all added in. We also, the cost for managing records is about 177,000. So that is SMARSH, which captures all of our email, text, and Microsoft Teams. Archive Social, which is website, social media, YouTube, etc. And those things are really important because we're required to maintain records for a certain amount of time. And the way we can do that is to have these programs help gather and maintain those records for us. I'm sure you've seen in the news other cities and agencies struggling because they lost text messages or lost social media or Teams message. They couldn't produce them, and those resulted in violations for those agencies.
Councilmember Scarborough, go ahead.
Yes.
Are all your requests required to have a legal review?
No.
Okay.
We work really hard to work together and work as a team and go through things. But there are times where we have to,
That's okay.
But we really try hard just to kind of work among ourselves and reach out to other professionals that we work with. We can reach out to Municipal Research Center for free advice. And we've reached out to the Attorney General's office and also had gotten advice. If we kind of knew where we wanted to go, we would reach out to them just to kind of give us like a confirmation. It's when we're really unsure where this could go is when we reach out to our legal team.
And do we historically only get back about
$1,700?
$1,000 for every
Yes.
383 we spent?
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty
That
typical.
hurts.
And if I could just ask a couple clarifying questions.
Yes.
The body worn cameras,
Yeah.
for an hour's worth of video, about how long does it take to redact that?
Well, it really depends on the content.
Mhm.
So if we're just talking about a driver's license and the screen in the police car, it goes pretty quickly.
Hour involving an incident in somebody's house?
Well, is potentially a lot of redaction there, especially if we're talking about juveniles, interiors of homes. We have to do a lot more redaction.
Right. So an hour's worth of video, do we have a sense? Is it 3 hours worth of review to redaction to complete? or-
I would say it's about a 3-to-1 ratio.
Yep. Okay.
Yes.
That's good. So that's one of the things is that unlike having paper where you can just read it and redact it at the same time, you watch the whole video, you do the redactions, and then you go through to make certain the redactions took. And at an incident, we have 2 officers here right now. You could have 2 officers and a sergeant show up at a domestic violence, and you could generate in an hour's worth of time, an hour times 3. And then that 3 times 3 is 9 hours
Correct.
worth of redaction. So that's something to think about that's a little bit different about the body worn cameras and the amount of work that's generated from that. And then the other thing too, the revenues you're identifying there, are those revenues only associated with people who are not involved in an incident?
That's correct. So if you're an involved party, you get it for free.
Yep. So one of the things that to observe there, and the reason why we charge people is that there were people that were just interested neighbors or people that were interested in an incident that would get body worn camera, even though it would be redacted in some cases just to see what happened or to put it on YouTube or something like that to get hits. So those are some of the things that happen. You also have the press that like to review things, and that's appropriate as well, but we do charge for them. Point being though, that if we're charging somebody the $1,000, it's not to people involved in an incident or their attorneys, but it is to people who are on the periphery or just simply interested in an incident.
That's correct. And one other thing I want to point out about the redaction is it's not just the images that have to be redacted,
Mhm.
but we also have to carefully listen to the audio because there are times when both the image and the audio need to be redacted.
All right. Thank you.
And that makes it even more complex. And sometimes we're basically going frame by frame by frame to ensure that the redactions are all there.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And then we'll have them continue with the next slide. All right. Oh, go ahead, Councilmember Walker. I was going to call you Councilmember Fisher. I don't know why, but there you go.
I've got questions that are stacking up, so I figured I'd stagger them better. You guys are amazing. So the questions aren't like, yeah. Are there differences in policies between agencies around body cameras that can lead to some cities having to do more or less redaction than others or exposes them? No, it's all basically.
No, it's
uniform
all the same. We all have to follow the same requirements related to body camera.
in terms of how often they're on or have to be on and.
Well, now that could be a policy issue from agency to agency on whether or not they're turning the camera on or not. That can change, but as far as how the records are processed and
Right.
reviewed and redacted, it's across the board consistent.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Go ahead and continue. Thank you.
All right. This next slide, will let Tricia go ahead?
So as you probably have guessed in the last couple of years that we've done this report, whenever we're onboarding some new technology, there's some challenges that are involved with that until we can get kind of the best workflow, figure out the best software that can help us with production. So, we've taken that time in 2024 to really figure that process out so that we can be as efficient as possible. As the slide indicates, every video has to be carefully reviewed, not just the images, but the audio has to be carefully listened to. And the body cameras are very good. They're picking up conversations that are in the background that sometimes I wish just were not captured, but they're there. So as we indicated, this process can be somewhat complex and time consuming. We need to make sure that we're very careful in doing this production. We're continuing to examine ways that we can provide production in a way that's efficient. That will be ongoing. I would say that the most complex part of the body camera production really has to do with juveniles, medical facilities, inside homes. The typical, if it's a simple collision, we're dealing with simple redaction of a driver's license or, like I said, the officer's MDT. But this has really increased, production of body camera has really increased the amount of time it is taking us to complete some of the more complex requests. And I think that's reflected in some of the data that Sherry has presented today on why we have some of these requests are open a lot longer than in the prior year's presentation.
And like last year, we showed you just a simple video, of just an officer sitting in a car and all the moving parts. You know, once you take that outside the car and you've got multiple officers, multiple people, you know, again, that complexity increases. Next slide. So here we just want to kind of talk about, you know, about how much we're doing redaction. So about 38% of our requests require redaction. And redaction would potentially include victim witnesses who requested non-disclosure, driver's licenses, social security numbers, you know, simple things like that, to more complex, you know, us kind of evaluating what information could potentially be private that falls under a statute that would allow us to redact that. And so 37 of our requests were denied in full. 92 were abandoned for either non-payment or no response to us trying to clarify if we don't understand what they're asking for. The reason we would deny it is, again, they're juvenile, maybe the request was made to the wrong agency, or the case is still under investigation. Here, we're just wanting to kind of just show you, like, our grant that we got, we digitized a lot of almost all of our community development records, if not all of them. That has significantly speeded up our process. So we don't have staff having to go out to archives, research boxes, pull the boxes, scan it, bring it back out. So again, we have a really good 68% of our records are done electronically. And then again, 1% for the hard copy records we might have to scan. We kind of point out this non-responsive, that 30%. So even if we don't give out records, we're still having to look for records. And we may not have them anymore because, you know, we got rid of them according to the state retention schedule, or they're just not records we have in general. And so again, we're spending time, but we may not have had anything to release. Next slide. So again, here's our public records policy where we kind of categorize. And this is really important because we are triaging requests based on their complexity. The Seattle Times and 17 other media organizations went to the Attorney General's office to complain about how long their requests were being taken to be handled. And so when we saw kind of their proposed changes to the model rules, I think we mentioned earlier to you at another meeting that we reached out to them to get a better understanding and explain what our program is and how we handle it. And they were very complimentary. They said, this is exactly what we're looking for other agencies. We want it to be triage. We want, you know, some agencies, they do request whatever one comes in first, that's the one that gets handled. Even if 2, 3, and 4, they could get out in a day, they go one by one. And so that's what's creating these backlog. So they are working on updating the model rules. So we have not updated our records policy because we're waiting for some of those changes to see what kind of clarifications are made, what kind of changes are being made. So both Patricia and Jody and I were all carefully watching that process. The next hearing is November 6th. So as this goes through, we're going to have a really updated model rules with the state. So we're going to be watching for that. Average time that we spend on requests is 3.4 hours. And or statewide, it's statewide, and the total staff hours is over 1 million hours, 743,000. I get lost in the math there, but basically there's a lot of time being spent statewide handling records requests. Next slide. So program highlights. We had hard copy paper records roundup as we were moving and spending time transitioning. But last year we focused on electronic records because that is another area that we need to kind of keep managing and trying to encourage staff to delete and get rid of things that they're allowed to get rid of. Again, the police department has worked really hard to get their records destruction up to date and current. And we got our email electronic message retention policy passed. the body camera redaction software, they did testing for the most efficient solution. The police department is 90% paperless. Go team. We continue to electronically manage our public records requests inside of Next Request, and SMARSH again manages Teams, text messaging, all those other, we have Facebook, YouTube, so we have everything covered that we need. And then we continue to train every new person, every seasonal that comes into the city. We sit down with them and explain what the expectations are, what their responsibilities are, and all this to help them make good decisions. So they're not using things inappropriately, so they know kind of what is expected of them. So next slide. So goals. So we have a lot of exciting things that we're going to be looking at working on, and some of these are going to take some time. They're not going to happen overnight. We're going to continue to develop our liaisons and do bi-monthly briefings so we can talk about case law that's coming up. The police department, they want to evaluate the impact for flock cameras once they're installed and operable. And they've also finalized a secure paperless fax, which is really an exciting change.
And the reason that's so important is the way that we currently receive medical records that are requested as a part of a criminal case is by fax. And the average page count for these faxes is anywhere from 80 to 140 pages. So we're receiving that, and then we're having to rescan that. And if we receive it already electronically in a confidential way, we kind of cut out that extra step of then having to rescan, and that's more efficient, it's more secure.
Yes, yeah, very good. We're continuing to work on digitizing records when we can. And also that includes the sex offense cases that are required to be sent to the Washington State Sheriff and Police Chiefs Association. They are the permanent record holder for all sex offenses. Policy update, we want to work on our records management, our public records policy, and we're going to finalize our scan and toss. Again, we're kind of waiting on a couple of things before we delve into our public records policy. The last update we did was in 2019, so it's not like, from 2002. I mean, it's fairly current, but again, there's some things that we'd like to update. Collaboration, that's something that we're really proud of that we do here, is how well that we work across our multiple departments. We have our liaisons, Patricia and Jody and I, work together on a regular basis. One of the other things that the police department is the production of evidence. So for example, Instagram Reels, audio, video, and other media content are needing with a third-party vendor assistance due to the challenging posed with the proprietary social media software. So while we could look at potentially getting something today to help with those redactions, tomorrow that propriety is going to change. So whatever we had today is probably going to be out of date in 2 weeks. So again, working with a third-party vendor, evaluating that's going to be kind of where we need to stay in that pocket there. And I don't know, Patricia, if you want to elaborate a little bit on that.
Well, I think what's surprising, and I know it surprised me, is that media that's collected as evidence is subject to the Public Records Act. And it can be challenging because as we're collecting evidence in cases, we're getting, video from Walmart, we're getting Instagram reels that a victim has provided to prove harassment or violence that's been committed against them. And so when we get these requests and there are redactions that are required to be made, we don't have all the tools with all the different software platforms in order to be able to do those redactions. So we have reached out to a third party that is able to do those for us. Fortunately, what the Public Records Act allows us to do is if we have to go outside to a vendor, the requester is responsible for the costs that are charged by that vendor in order to get those redactions done. But definitely, I mean, we could not afford to buy every software platform necessary in order to do the redactions for all these different pieces of audio and video that we collect.
Great. Yeah. And then retention, we're going to be working, we continue, it's kind of a goal, is to evaluate whether we can move from SMARSH and go over just to Microsoft Purview. And so we're going to try to run some tests. We're very confident when we do a search in SMARSH, what comes back to us. And so we want to compare that with Microsoft Purview to make sure we're getting the same amount. They've done some changes. So we have a local coworker in another agency who's offered to come and help us. So we're excited to meet up with her and kind of see what we can do to start tackling that project. But that's kind of where we're headed. And then lastly, here's a list of all of our records liaisons in the city. Again, you'll see that it's pretty much every department has a liaison. And again, we work on training those liaisons and then having meetings to kind of talk about changes. And then again, we oversee all that and make sure, hey, have you thought about looking here? Did we check here? You know, I see that they're asking for this. I might be able to pull that out of SMARsh. So, you know, again, we're working collaboratively with each other to make sure we're giving out as much of all the records that we're required to give out as part of that request. So that's all we have.
All right.
Are there any questions?
Thank you very much, you two. Are there any questions? Okay, go ahead, Councilmember Walker and then Councilmember Hanford.
What percentage of the requests do you think are like basically phishing from firms or media people that aren't involved directly with the case? Maybe not even people that are on the periphery of the scene or something, but people that are clearly looking for something that they could take the city to court for.
So I couldn't give you an exact percentage, but I can say with body camera, we are seeing an increase in media individuals who want these records and they're not involved parties. That is on the increase. That's going to continue to be on the increase. I couldn't give you a percentage. I would say that the majority of the requests that we receive, they are involved parties, attorneys representing them, insurance companies that are, you know, wanting to get collision reports. But I will probably have some statistics for you in the next year's report showing what has happened with the body camera program. So in 2024, I would say at around June, people figured it out that we had them. And so we started seeing more and more requests coming in. So it's really in 2025 where we're seeing these media outlets or YouTube outlets that are now asking for these records and they're not involved.
I think one thing though that we have to make sure that we keep in mind is this is open to all unless there is a statute that says that they're not allowed to have that record. So we're not to ask why they want the records. We can't try to interpret. We just have to handle the requests as they come in. But it is something that, you know, somebody from Florida asking for a disturbance in Monroe, Washington, you know, obviously there's something obvious in that they have a YouTube channel or something like that.
And those individuals have to pay for the redaction. It's only the involved parties that get it without having to pay for the redaction costs. So, you know, we do find that some people go, oh, yeah, no, thank you, after they realize this is going to cost $300, $400, $500, and they walk away.
I guess this is just a sort of idea for maybe the council to consider in the future. I was reading about agentic artificial intelligence and how that's going to lead to even more public records burden for government agencies of all sizes, because that just means that I could create an agent that I could tell it every day, send in a public records request to every city in Washington asking for their body camera footage. And I can't even fathom what that would do to the workload. And so maybe the idea for us going forward is we have to, I don't know, proactive creation of legislation ideas for Olympia or other states, because that's going to become a huge problem.
I think one of the tools that we have in our toolbox to deal with those is when bot requests are not allowed.
Correct.
So the state does not allow those, but we have seen these companies who just send out phishing to every agency, but we have a fee schedule and there are fees involved and we charge for electronic records. So again, when they have to pay, a lot of times their interest wanes. And so again, we're just doing what's allowed by the law, is that we're allowed to try to help cover some of our expenses. But again, a lot of those types of requests, once the payment request is made, they don't.
That's when you drop off.
Well,
Yeah.
and this is where I think the city policy that says if you're a requester and you've made 10 requests and we're going to work on one at a
Yeah.
time, really actually helps us manage requests. And that way, we're also ensuring that our citizens who really need this information are also getting prioritized. So I think that's a great policy, and it'll help avoid that burden that you're forecasting
Right.
having the kind of impact that it might have.
Yeah, that makes, awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hanford.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, no, two comments and a question. So first of all, I remember talking, I think it might have been your report a year ago when you were talking about downsizing the amount of paperwork before the move back here. So great strategy on that. I'm sure that made the move a little easier.
Yes.
Second thing, when you talked about the body cameras and the increased time of processing, things like that. I'm so thankful that we led the way years ago with the body cameras, and having the body cameras, in my opinion, is worth the extra processing time. And so I want to thank you for
Yes.
the extra burden that is. I think it's worth it to the public, so. And then the last question is there anything that we can do to help? Any changes that you would want to see from council?
Well, as I mentioned, when we kind of first started the presentation, your support has been significant. My position got turned into full-time, so that has helped supporting the city hall side. And the tools that we have asked for in our budget, those things keep getting approved year to year. And again, those are things that help us do our job more efficiently. And so your support has been absolutely amazing. So we appreciate everything that you guys have done so far. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other questions or comments? All right. Last thing, I'm just going to say how much I appreciate the work you two are doing, and that the rest of the team is doing. So just thank you very much for everything you do.
Thank you. You're
Yeah.
welcome. Thank you.
All right, the next item on the agenda is item 5.2. This is 2025 Monroe Municipal Court Assessment with Liam McCorkle. Liam.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, Council. It is always hard to follow the public records officers. They have such an incredible presentation, and it is honestly probably my favorite presentation each year. With that said, today I am discussing the Municipal Court Assessment, or the 2025 Monroe Municipal Court Assessment. I would like to just give a quick shout out before I start the presentation to Pam Haley, our court administrator. She did a lot of work to help me compile a lot of this data and also reach out to some of the comparison city contacts. So just wanted to give her credit where credit is due. So with that, I will head over to the next slide. So what we're going to do today is we are going to pretty much just do a run through of the report. I'm not going to hit every single detail, but I wanted to make sure that all of you are caught up to speed with what the report says, and also go over the key points and recommendations that are articulated in that report. Next slide, please. I'm also going to give you kind of the executive summary or the conclusion at the very beginning of the presentation. So as I'm going through it, you can kind of make the connections between the overall trends that I identify here and the recommendations that are being made. So as far as the executive summary goes, the overall trends we see within the Monroe Municipal Court, our case trends have largely mirrored state and comparison courts. Our forecasts are expected to grow between 5.5 to 38% by 2032. Our primary cases within the Monroe Municipal Court remain driving with license suspended, or DWLS cases, trespass, both first and second degree, theft 3, and assault in the 4th degree, as well as controlled substance abuse or controlled substances. All of those are remaining the most common misdemeanors within the Monroe Municipal Court. With that said, theft, trespass, and controlled substances have all decreased overall since 2019, whereas DWLS cases have increased since 2019. And we'll get more into the reasonings for why some of that might be. As sort of the challenges that this report really highlights and goes into, the Monroe Municipal Court operates with less full-time employee or full-time equivalents and staff than other peer jurisdictions. And we've also seen some challenges in rising costs, especially for associated services. So that includes jail costs and public defense costs. And we go into that a bit in this report as well. The final recommendations, I'll go more in depth into them at the end of the presentation. But there are recommendations to continue mitigation for some of those high volume misdemeanors, continuing to evaluate charging practices for certain crimes, namely DWLS charges, seeing if some of those can be reevaluated and refiled as infractions in order to minimize some of those jail and public defense costs. Along the same lines, investigating potential alternatives to jail, so electronic home monitoring, continuing to monitor court technologies, and then accounting for court impacts from automated traffic safety cameras and making sure that that is part of council's discussions moving forward, is understanding how those cameras impact the court itself. The report also shows, going back to that challenge of having fewer court staff than peer jurisdictions, to plan for additional court staffing over the next 6 years, especially for court clerks. And then finally, the final two recommendations are more administrative functions, but it's developing key performance indicators to ensure that we can continue to monitor the court's performance over a shorter period of time, and then also planning for a future court assessment 5 years down the road. So that's the very executive summary. We'll now go into the actual report details. Next slide, please. We'll start with the background. Next slide. So the Monroe Municipal Court was established January 1st, 2015. Over time, the purpose of a Monroe Municipal Court or of a municipal court might change, but originally, when the municipal court was established, council really had three main goals. The first of which was to improve customer service. At the time, the district court had a lot of cutbacks to services that impacted and limited services, especially for outside customers, including phone services, a perceived reluctance to process automated traffic safety camera infractions, and then also reduced arraignment hearing frequencies, which affected the total jail days and also longer waiting times for people to get to trial. There's also a desire to align judicial philosophy with the municipal court judge, especially with ensuring that there was a consistent enforcement of city ordinances, including SOTA ordinances and also extreme risk protection orders. And then finally, it was decided at the time that the Monroe Municipal Court would actually save the city money compared to contracting with a different court service. The original goal of the municipal court was to have it be financially supported by an automated traffic safety camera program. But by the time that the court was actually established in January 1st of 2015, that program no longer existed. But the original intent was to have some of the costs recouped by the automated traffic safety camera program. Regardless, 2015 court was established. Like all other courts in the state of Washington, it is a court of limited jurisdiction, which means it is authorized by Washington state statute to preside over criminal misdemeanors, gross misdemeanors, civil infractions, and other City of Monroe code violations. But just as a brief overview, misdemeanors are defined as crimes in Washington state code. Infractions are defined as not necessarily a crime, but it is something that goes against the Washington state code or a city ordinance. Misdemeanors are typically or can be charged by up to 365 days in jail, whereas traffic infractions or infractions are just charged by a fine typically. With all that said, all the felonies, which are charges that or crimes that encompass jail sentences longer than 365 days at a maximum, all of those are outside of the scope of the Monroe Municipal Court, and they need to be charged off to a superior court. If you're looking at the Monroe Municipal Code, it's chapter 2.8 that dictates the Monroe Municipal Code in the city of Monroe. That code gives the municipal court exclusive original jurisdiction over all traffic infractions and criminal charges arising under city ordinances. The municipal court is run by the municipal court judge. Currently, that's Jessica Ness, who is appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council. And they also work closely with our court administrator who oversees the day-to-day functionings of the court. With all that said, 5 years after the court was established in 2020, the city decided to conduct a municipal court survey. This survey used some consulting services in order to evaluate strategies to improve existing court outcomes and also alternative delivery service models for processing adult infractions and misdemeanors. Really, this survey looked at 3 potential alternatives for the Monroe Municipal Court, one of which was kind of keeping the status quo of the municipal court, the second of which was removing the municipal court and contracting with the Snohomish County Court for court services. And then the third was establishing a joint court with the cities of Lake Stephen and Sultan and expanding Monroe's own municipal court in order to accommodate their own caseloads. Eventually, the Monroe City Council decided to go with the first of that option, but the recommendation also provided in that report some additional recommendations, including expanded self-service court options, such as online payments, more sustainable staffing, including more probation programming, including the hiring of a probation staff member, and then also integrating some motivation intervention programming, including moral recognition therapy. All that said, the 2020 Municipal Court Survey came at a very unique time. It was right at the precipice of COVID, and it didn't really take into account any of the impacts that COVID-19 had on the court systems. So 5 years later, we are now looking at a new court assessment, not so much looking at those kind of 3 alternatives for courts, but rather looking into the trends and comparisons of court caseloads and costs to serve as somewhat of a catalyst for conversations and just evidence based solutions and conversations for potential improvements to the municipal court. So that is why we are here. Next slide, please. All good. So I'm going to start out with some statewide trends just to give the overview of the context that the Monroe Municipal Court is in within the state of Washington. As you can see in that, I believe it's figure 1, although it's kind of hard to see. Prior to 2020, infractions and misdemeanors saw a steady decline across the state. Between 2020 and 2022, the courts across Washington really dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic, especially as Washingtonians were encouraged to stay at home during the pandemic and also shift over to remote work. There was just less in-person interactions. There was less people on the roads, less people racking up those traffic infractions, and also misdemeanor filing simply by interacting with one another. Also, a lot of courts and prosecutors stopped or delayed prosecution of certain nonviolent cases in order to reduce interactions within the jail system or in-person interactions within the jail system. With all that said, since 2022, courts across Washington have seen a slow but still steady increase in both infraction and misdemeanor filings. And while there is reason to believe that those will continue to increase back up to pre-COVID levels, it's not a necessity. There are still many factors, including legislative priorities by the state of Washington, that may slow or halt that continued increase back up to pre-COVID levels. With that said, over the last decade, there have been a number of trends that have impacted this kind of flow that you see. The first of which being that many district and municipal courts have shifted away from a traditional focus on punishment of an approach to focusing on restorative or rehabilitative justice. I included a little graphic up there to kind of explain the difference. But in simple terms, the end goal of court systems has slowly moved away from focusing on enacting punitive measures on wrongdoers and then more towards addressing the root causes of crime and stabilizing defendants and the community members that the crime in question impacts. Along the same lines, there is more evidence-based alternatives to traditional prosecution. An example of that is a community court. Expansion of automated traffic safety camera programs is another one that has impacted these statewide trends. Traffic infractions for cameras are actually processed as parking infractions rather than regular infractions. So you might see a dip in overall infractions, but at the same time, although it's not illustrated in that graph, parking infractions have risen by about the same percent. So that is another factor that could explain the declining infraction rates. There's also been an increasing reliance on technology in order to reduce operating costs. This includes digital filings, the use of online payment portals, and then also artificial intelligence to compile work items such as memos, emails, etc. There has also been national and statewide efforts even before COVID to reduce incarceration rates. Another one is a substantial shift in the court's ability to pursue financial collections. This really derived from a court case in State v. Blasnia, in which it was decided that courts of limited jurisdictions need to take into account a defendant's ability to pay before imposing any legal financial obligations. And then they also need to make individual inquiries into the defendant's current and future ability to pay before imposing those court costs. All that is to say, since that time, it has been very difficult for the court systems across Washington state to recoup costs and generate revenue as it was before 2015. Finally, and council has talked about this one before, but there have been statewide efforts to reduce caseload standards or caseloads, excuse me, for public defenders. So that kind of gives the overview of the statewide trends. I will go to the next slide, which begins to talk a little bit more about this court assessment that we're talking about. In order to do this assessment, the strategy that staff took was to compare the Monroe Municipal Court with a couple of different courts. This is also how the 2020 assessment was done. In 2020, we used the comparison courts of the city of Sultan and the city of Lake Stevens, primarily because we were looking into creating a joint court with them. For this court assessment, we decided to look into courts that had both similar court services, similar populations, and a similar ratio of number of cases per population. We also wanted to make sure that the courts we were looking at all had a part-time judge, so they were roughly equivalent to what we would be looking at in the city of Monroe. After doing a brief survey of potential courts, the city decided on looking at Tequila, SeaTac, and Lake Forest Park as our primary juxtapositions to our own community court, or excuse me, municipal court. There are still a couple of notable differences with those courts. I factored out those differences where I can, but they still, especially in the fiscal portion, have a big impact when we're looking at the numbers. One of which is Tequila and Lake Forest Park both operate traffic safety camera programs that drastically increases the amount of staff and time they need, and also expenses that they need in order to keep their court systems running to process all those infractions. Another interesting and potentially unique one is the city of SeaTac actually works with the Port of Seattle to process all of their cases. So where applicable, I have parsed out the Port of Seattle cases for sake of comparison with the city of SeaTac, but it is something to note that there is a large portion of SeaTac's cases that do derive from the Port of Seattle, and that also increases their staffing and operational needs. So with that, I will go to the next slide. And now we will go into the real meat of the court assessment. And I'm really just going to touch on the main key takeaways. I'm happy to answer more questions, but more details and more graphs and data is all contained within the report. Next slide, please. So the first section is historic case filings. As you can see and might recall back to the statewide trends, Monroe's filings closely follow state and comparison city trends. Also in Appendix C of the report, you can also see all of the comparison courts' historic caseload filings. And by large extent, the city of Monroe follows along the same trend line with a steady decline before 2020 in both infraction and misdemeanors, a sharp drop in 2021, and then a slow but steady rise since 2022. Just to give the numbers, because sometimes it's hard to look at a graph. In 2024, the city of Monroe had 1,335 filings. 753 of those were infractions, and 582 of those were misdemeanors. The other quick point I will point out is you might notice a massive jump in 2014. That was when the municipal court was established, also potentially explaining why we just saw a shoot up in the number of infractions in 2014. Next slide, please. All right. So key takeaways, like I just mentioned, Monroe's historic case filings largely mirrored statewide trends. You can see in figure 7 there, that shows the comparison of court case volumes per 1,000 population. Monroe has slightly more infractions per 1,000 population outside of Lake Forest Park than the cities of Tequila and SeaTac. And then also for misdemeanors, the city of Monroe has slightly more misdemeanors per 1,000 population than the cities of SeaTac and Lake Forest Park. the exception being Tequila. But if you're looking at total cases per 1,000 population, the city of Monroe is roughly equivalent to where we would expect other jurisdictions to be. The one point that is not illustrated in this graph is parking infractions. The city of Monroe processes far less parking infractions than any of the comparison cities. For reference, the city of Monroe processed about 8 parking infractions per 1,000 population. Tequila processed 114, SeaTac processed 28, and Lake Forest Park processed 2,400 per 1,000 population. For Tequila and Lake Forest Park, a lot of that is explained by automated traffic safety camera programs, but it is still worth noting that a lot less time in the municipal court and in our own operations we're spending on parking infractions or things that would be classified as parking infractions. Next slide, please. So now that we've looked at the history, we can look at the case forecast and what we are looking at. What staff did was we took both a low, moderate, and a high estimate to assume where we might be in terms of caseloads by 2032. The moderate estimate pretty much assumes that trends remain the same for how they are now. In terms of population growth remains consistent with the comprehensive plan. Misdemeanor growth rate continues at its current rate, and then infraction growth rate also continues at its current rate. For the low estimate, similar set of criteria. Population growth slows compared to the comprehensive plan. Misdemeanor growth rate slows in line with the 10-year average, so actually decreases by about 1% year over year. And then infraction growth rate would slow consistent with population growth rate. For the high estimate, that is assuming our population growth goes beyond the comprehensive plan, and both misdemeanor growth rate and infraction growth rate go back to pre-COVID levels at a much more expedient rate than we are currently seeing by 2032. So with all that said, projections estimate that filings will grow by between 5.5 and 38% by 2032. None of this takes into account if the city adopts automated traffic safety camera programs or if there's other legislation that dictates what we're able to classify as a misdemeanor, what we're able to classify as an infraction, or regulate our own policing practices. So it's just something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. All right, top case volumes. So I will mention our top cases have remained consistent between 2020 and this current court assessment. This data is from 2024. Our top misdemeanors continue to be driving with license suspended, trespass both in the first and second degree, theft 3, assault 4, and controlled substances. DWLS is also separated into first, second, and third degree. It's not illustrated here, but about 17% of those are DWLS in the third degree. So just something to keep in mind. All that said, total controlled substances, theft, and trespass cases have all declined since 2019. This is partially explained, or could partially be explained, by successful rehabilitative justice programming, such as the community court embedded social worker program. But there have also been state law changes. A notable one is the Not My Pants law that has decreased the total number of especially controlled substance cases in our data between 2024 and 2020. With all that said, the DWLS cases have actually nearly doubled since 2019, which is an interesting point that we will talk more about in the recommendations. The majority of infraction cases themselves are largely traffic related. Infraction frequencies will largely vary between cities depending on police practices, initiatives, and proximity to major transit corridors, and also just our traffic patrolling regulations. For the city of Monroe, we obviously have US 2, State Route 522, and 203, all of which contribute to what kind of infractions we are seeing. In terms of comparing with other cities, especially the misdemeanors that we see here, differing policies and police practices, including the size of regional assets like shopping malls, retail stores, and simple locational differences, may all impact the differences in frequency that we see between Monroe, Tequila, and SeaTac. You can especially see the city of Tequila processes a lot larger of theft 3 cases than the city of Monroe. Part of that might be explained by the simple fact that Tequila has more businesses and shopping malls than the city of Monroe does.
Mr. McCorkle, before you move on to the next category,
Yeah.
Councilmember Scarborough's got a question.
Okay.
Under assault free or theft free, excuse me. Can you tell me what the difference is between Tequila's 42% and SeaTac 7% and us 11%? Most of the other categories are pretty close together in all three entities there. Can you tell me what on a theft free is that they'd have 42% and we'd have 11?
Yeah, so I think that's what I was just mentioning is the city of Tukwila has a lot more of those shopping malls, a lot more of those retail centers, a lot more businesses than the city of Monroe. So a part of that might be that the city of Tukwila's focus and really the types of cases that they're seeing come in are really due to their locational differences. So I wouldn't necessarily take that 42% as an indication that Tukwila is doing something wrong or Monroe is doing something right. It's more just a fact of those locational differences that we're seeing between the assets that Monroe has versus the assets Tukwila has versus the assets SeaTac has.
Mr. McCorkle, that's where South Center Mall is, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, any other questions before Mr. McCorkle continues? Okay, please continue. Thank you.
So I also put it in my report, but just to put it out here for you as well, infraction cases are even more varied between jurisdictions depending on what practices and what their priorities of their police departments are. But Monroe's top volume infraction cases include speeding, expired registration, and operating a vehicle without a license. All right, next slide, please. This just goes into the zip code data. So about 40% of all defendants reside within the Monroe zip code. The remaining 60% all come from outside the city of Monroe's zip code, including the cities of Snohomish, Sultan, Gold Bar, Everett, Lake Stevens, and Marysville. I will mention in 2018, the number of filings that originated in the city of Monroe was about 31%. This means there is an increase of a little bit less than 9 percentage points in local Monroe defendants between 2018 and 2024. I will say having more defendants that originate from outside city limits is a common trend among most Western Washington jurisdictions. In the city of Monroe, especially the intersection of major transit corridors, like I mentioned on the previous slide, between US 2, State Route 522, and State Route 203, all help inflate the amount of non-Monroe residents that are being charged in the Monroe Municipal Court. So part of that explanation there. Next slide, please. Going to go over this one quickly. I know council had a full separate discussion on public defense or presentation on public defense. But as just a kind of recap, the city of Monroe is required by both the state and federal law to provide public defense services to indigent criminal defendants. The vast majority of criminal cases in the city of Monroe, you can see on the screen on table 7, is about 85% of Monroe's defendants utilize contracted public defense services. That amount is roughly equivalent to the amount of Tukwila, slightly higher than the city of SeaTac. As another reminder, in February of 2025, the Washington Supreme Court adopted new indigent defense caseload standards that were proposed by the Washington State Bar Association. These new state standards would reduce or will reduce caseload standards for public defenders by 400 cases, misdemeanor cases annually, down to all the way to 120 misdemeanor cases annually. Pursuant to a interim order by the Washington Supreme Court, the city is only required to reduce caseloads for public defenders by 10% each year until 2035. So there's essentially a 10-year implementation period. With that said, we've also conducted a low estimate and a high estimate for what that means in terms of our financing for public defenders. And it is very likely that by 2035, we can see an increase up to $780,000 in our public defense spending. So almost quadrupling our current expenditures on public defense, not including any sort of inflation corrections. So something to keep aware of. Moreover, as competition for public defenders increases in a scarce labor market, it's going to be very hard to even recruit new public defenders or to retain public defense contracts. So something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Probation services. So as part of this assessment, we just did a survey of other services that cities were providing. We kind of roped that in with probationary services. Part of the 2020 assessment recommendation was to expand the city of Monroe's probationary services. Well, council did that. We hired a probation's counselor in 2021. In addition to supervising the conditions of probation, they also help coordinate the community court for the Monroe Municipal Court. Currently, our probation's counselor has about 89 active cases, 57 monitored cases, and 7 cases that are record checked only. For comparison, the city of Tukwila has about 82 active and monitored cases. In terms of community services that the Monroe Municipal Court puts on, we have our own community court, which represents a partnership between the prosecutor, public defender, judge, defendant, and even sometimes victims of crime in order to defer traditional prosecution in support of certain terms of arrangement for participating in the community court programming that can include community service. It can include participation in certain human services programming, et cetera. City of Monroe also has a deferred prosecution program. We have an embedded social worker within our public defender contract, which helps support and access sort of a case manager for some of the cases within indigent clients and the public defender's office. And then we also offer a domestic violence moral recognition therapy, another recommendation that came out of the 2020 municipal court survey. Of the services that were surveyed, the city of Monroe is very comparable to the services that other municipal courts are providing. The two that we noted that the city of Monroe does not currently have is a community resource closet. That is something that provides basic resources to clients and citizens of Monroe, such as water, food, basic hygiene utensils. After talking with the municipal court judge, that is something that has already been planned for, and it will be included now that we are moving back into the new municipal court office or municipal court space. The other service that the city of Monroe does not have that a couple of other cities do is a youth court. That is something that is going to require more staff time and financing if council desires to put on some sort of that programming surrounding a specific youth court. Next slide, please. So jail services is not necessarily a court expense, but it is what we would call an associated service. It's something that the court is intertwined with. And I have multiple slides because I know there have been questions about why we have seen this increase in jail costs over the years. So bear with me as I kind of walk you through the process for investigating these jail service costs. So even when looking back to pre-COVID years, jail expenditures have seen a steep increase over the years, especially in 2025, projected expenses are increasing nearly 100,000 from last year, which was an increase of about 50,000 from the year before. With that said, the housing day rate, that is the amount that we pay the jail, the Snohomish County Jail, who we contact with per day per inmate who is residing within their jail system. You can see that amount. It had a sharp jump in both 2021 and 2022, but since 2022, it has mostly remained stagnant, only increasing by about 3% each year. So that can only explain part of the reason for why we're seeing these increased jail expenses, especially compared to those pre-COVID years. Next slide, please. So this graph, this figure 10, really highlights and breaks down the 4 costs that we see coming out of the Monroe Municipal Jail. Those are the total housing days. Those are, like I just explained, the maintenance days that we are spending per day per inmate who is residing within the jail. There is also booking fees. That's the amount we pay to book somebody into jail. Video court expenses, the amount that the jail will charge us if they have to provide any sort of Zoom service for somebody Zooming into the court. And then the city is also obligated to provide any medical expenses or other expenses that the inmate derives or creates. As you can see from the figure, the overwhelming driver of jail costs and also the overwhelming driver of that increase in jail costs really comes from the fee for the total housing days or those maintenance days. Interesting note is total bookings have actually largely remained consistent from 2021 to 2025. So it's not that we're booking more people into jail. It's that people are serving longer terms, or there's more time being spent in jail by individuals. Booking fees, video hours, and medical expenses are all very marginal expenses compared to the total amount of housing days that we are seeing. Next slide, please. So this leads us into the reasoning that the increase in projected total housing days is either caused by longer jail sentences or less jail time being suspended by the municipal court judge, or more time being spent in jail awaiting trial, potentially being caused by things like bail requirements or inability to pay bail. Aside from 2022, as you can see in figure 10, there's typically a gap between the total amount of days that are sentenced by the municipal court judge versus the total amount of housing days that we are actually being billed. This gap can partially be explained in this data and the way this data was derived, in part by overlapping sentences. So those are sentences that might be issued in 2021 but aren't actually served out fully until 2022. And then also additional post-conviction sentences. So these are sentences that are increased after they are put into jail, they're sentenced into jail, and their terms of their reduced sentence are violated, so there is suspended time. All of that is not reflected in this data and can partially explain that gap. But qualitative studies suggest that that's only a small explanation or variable in explaining that gap that you see in figure 11. The largest potential cause is that the time spent waiting in jail, waiting for trial, is actually the primary cause and factor you are seeing that gap, especially in 2025. And that leads us into what we are seeing as the primary contributor to increased jail costs. Since bookings have stayed consistent, and since both post-sentence jail services have remained relatively consistent, or in the report, you can even see they've decreased between 2021 and 2025, it appears that the primary contributor to the increased jail costs is an increase in the amount of time individuals are staying in jail prior to arraignment or a final sentence by the court judge. Next slide, please. So this goes into the why are jail costs increasing, hoping to answer that question. Higher housing day rates that we have seen over the years, it's nearly doubled since 2018, and also a slow rise in misdemeanor filing since COVID is going to inherently be part of the reason we're seeing that increasing jail costs. But I would point you towards the more pre-sentencing jail time as a strong indicator for why we're seeing these jail costs increase so much, especially in this year, 2025. Part of that pre-sentencing jail time can be derived from stronger bail requirements. We looked at the city of Stanwood's explanation. They've seen a similar increase in jail costs this year, and they did their own reporting and their own explanations for why they're seeing those jail costs increase. And they pointed one of their primary factors was as courts move back to these pre-COVID practices, courts have re-implemented strong bail requirements rather than releasing subjects or individuals on personal reconnaissance. And there's also an increase. They also noted that there was an increase in the number of repeat offenders, both increasing the amount of bail requirements on those people who are entering the court and also their potential jail sentences. In meeting with the judge, we also found that failure to present themselves in court is another cause for those increased stays waiting for trial. Even for very simple misdemeanor cases such as reckless driving that traditionally wouldn't carry a jail sentence with them. If that individual fails to show up into court, the judge may issue a warrant for arrest. If that person is found, they would get booked into jail. They will serve jail time waiting to have the court hear their case. All of that could have been avoided if they just would have showed up into jail in the first place. So another reason why pre-sentencing jail time might be increasing is simple failure to present themselves in court. And then the last and potentially most simple is just the timing of when people are being booked into jail. If somebody is being booked into jail on a Friday, we are going to be charged for those booking maintenance days for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and so on until that person is able to present themselves in court and present their arguments in court. So we're seeing an increase in the amount of people being booked over the weekend or right before the weekend. It's very likely we're going to be charged 3 or 4 days for that individual being in jail even for charges that will immediately get suspended or get out booked of jail. Setting standards for bookings and procedures for certain low level quality of crime, or nonviolent rather, quality of crime cases, namely I'm pointing to DWLS charges, may assist in minimizing some of this pre-sentencing jail days. And we will get more into that a little bit in the recommendations. Next slide, please. Just a couple more. Staffing and FTEs. The big takeaway here is that simply the city of Monroe lags behind comparison courts in full-time equivalents. The cities of Monroe, or excuse me, Tukwila and SeaTac both have higher overall case volumes than the city of Monroe, and also Tukwila and Lake Forest Park operate automated traffic safety programs, all that increasing their need for staffing. With all that said, even if you factor those cases and expenses out of the system, the city of Monroe still has a higher total cases per FTE than any of the other city, and it is a fairly notable difference. So in order to keep up with these caseloads, staff have historically relied and have historically done a very good job of relying on cross-training in order to maintain services. So that includes having our probations officers, our court clerks, and even our court administrator understand each other's roles and be able to fill into each other's roles in times of high case volumes. With that said, that's not necessarily a sustainable staffing strategy. And over the next 6 years, especially if the city was to adopt some sort of traffic safety camera program, it is very likely that additional court clerks are going to be needed to integrate into our FTE count for the court in order to keep up with caseloads and also keep up with additional programming that we might implement. Next slide, please. And this is the final kind of data and analysis portion, and that's the fiscal analysis. I go a lot more in depth into the report, but overall, you can see here that the cost for the municipal court and associated services. So once again, that's jail, public defense, and prosecution. All of them have steadily increased over the last 4 years, and this trend is generally consistent with our comparison courts as well. Next slide, please. With that said, and this kind of goes back to the previous point as well, is the per case and per misdemeanor cost for the city of Monroe maintains the lowest cost of all comparison cities. This low per case cost is largely driven by those low personnel and benefit expenditures. We have less FTEs than any other comparison city. And then the low per misdemeanor cost is driven both by those low personnel costs, and also when you're comparing it to the cities of especially Tukwila and SeaTac, we actually have lower relative jail costs, since those two are both part owners in the SCORE jail, which have drastically higher costs for both of them. The city of Monroe also receives funding for some of our community programming, including the administrative office of the courts for our community court. That also helps us to lower our overall cost. So you can see on the screen, Monroe's per case cost is about $412, and our per misdemeanor cost is about $2,484, once again being the lowest among those comparison cities. Next slide, please. And now we will get into the recommendations. And these recommendations are largely general, but they're meant to help council in starting to form conversations and serve as the catalyst for some of those data-driven improvements that we can see moving forward in the Monroe Municipal Court. Next slide, please. So the first kind of section of recommendations, I just kind of put them under a general heading of case filings and cost reductions. The first of which is mitigation for high volume misdemeanors. The 2020 Monroe Court Assessment provided evidence-based options for improving divertment of first-time offenders and lowering recidivism for high-frequency misdemeanors, especially those related to chemical dependence. But even as cases return to pre-COVID levels, those controlled substance theft 3 and criminal trespass filings have all decreased since 2019. And although further analysis is required to determine the extent of the success of these programs in reducing those cases versus state law changes, i.e. The Not My Pants law, part of this recommendation is to evaluate those services and continuing to pursue grant funding where we can. So RCW 10.101 funds and also federal SAMHSA funding in order to support some of those diversion programs that help us reduce the overall misdemeanor volumes that we're seeing in our court system, helping to reduce both jail and public defense costs. The next one is helping to evaluate charging practices for certain quality of life crimes. This includes just convening a committee, including police officers, the court, executive staff, to determine circumstances where infraction tickets might be more appropriate than misdemeanors. A core example of this that we've seen at other jurisdictions is driving with license suspended. Typically, driving with license suspended misdemeanors are could be charged instead as no valid operative license infractions. Most DWLS charges are dropped once a defendant becomes relicensed, and the optimal goal for both of those cases and those filings is for that individual to become relicensed. So if you're able to achieve the same outcome with an infraction versus a misdemeanor, you're going to see much lower costs charging it as an infraction rather than a misdemeanor, while still maintaining an incentive to maintain fees. So part of this recommendation is to do more research into that and then develop guidelines and initiatives that minimize unnecessary misdemeanor filings without compromising any public safety concerns in the community. Along the same lines and helping to reduce costs is investigating potential alternatives to jail, especially during the COVID pandemic. There was a lot of investigation into electronic home monitoring systems. This recommendation is looking into continuing that research into the cost and outcomes of electronic home monitoring systems in order to see if they can help us reduce and alleviate some of our jail costs that we're seeing, and then also continue to offer behavioral health and substance abuse programs as diversion options to avoid people heading back into the jail system. Modernizing technology is going to be something we will likely continue to see, especially as the city of Monroe operates with less overall staff. Technology and using technology efficiently is imperative to ensuring that our court systems continue to operate efficiently. So continuing to update our court payment portal, looking at other jurisdictions to see more user-friendly options to be able to engage with that, reduce in-person interactions where we are able to for simple financial transactions, and then also exploring implementation of things like virtual agents to help answer routine questions and direct clients to the correct resources would help to modernize our court technology and continue to operate our municipal court with lower overall staffing. The final one in this category is just keeping in mind automated traffic safety cameras. Earlier this year, the Monroe City Council articulated a desire to implement a traffic safety program on certain street corridors, which will help reduce the time needed for some police monitoring and patrolling of certain streets for speeding violations. But the startup staffing, public engagement process is something that still needs to be planned carefully. The municipal court judge has already flagged that installing a new traffic safety camera program will add an additional court day. So really what this recommendation is getting at is to make sure that when we are looking at that automated traffic safety camera program, we're selecting locations that aren't going to overwhelm the municipal court or the judge hours, and that we are also installing cameras in a phased approach to allow evaluation and make sure that we are suddenly not in an issue where we're not able to process cases because we simply don't have the court capacity to. There's also an ability to make sure that some of the revenue generated from that automated traffic safety camera program can go back into the court system to fund some of those operational needs, including the hiring of additional court staff. So all stuff to keep in mind. Next slide, please. And I promise this is the last one, I believe. These are the last recommendations. Staffing, obviously, in order to get the city of Monroe back up in line with comparison courts, the city should be planning to incorporate additional court clerk positions, especially if an automated traffic safety camera program is going to be implemented within the next 6 years. Ideally, that would be phased with revenue we are seeing coming in from an automated traffic safety camera program. And then also our city is very successful in cross-training, and that should be something that should continue to be encouraged and highlighted in our municipal court. As I mentioned at the very top of the presentation, these last two are very much an administrative recommendation, and that's to develop some key performance indicator. So those are data points that we would keep on hand, update quarter after quarter to provide a more consistent evaluation of the municipal court, and then also plan for a future court assessment in 5 years, continuing to track the long-range progress and trends of the municipal court, and also include in that assessment some more deeper analysis into rehabilitative justice programs, including the community court, embedded social worker program, et cetera. So that was a lot of talking. Next slide, please. But I believe that concludes my report. Like I mentioned, all of that is contained within your agenda packets. And yeah, I will hand it back to the mayor.
All right, thank you. Council members, any questions? Councilmember Walker and then Councilmember Fisher.
It was a tough act to follow up the previous presentation, but that was awesome, man. Thank you very much. The driving with license suspended, does that strictly mean suspended license, like a suspended license, or does it also encompass drivers who've never been licensed to?
I believe it would encompass both, but I would defer my judgment to the chief back there.
Do you think generally DWLS refers only to people who have been licensed before, who have a suspended license, or do you think that term has also kind of encompassed people that have never had a driver's license in the state?
No, I think that's another RCW.
Okay. How often, if ever, is it used as a sort of step down charge? I don't know if that's another one for the chief. And I might have a poor understanding of that process, but I'm thinking about when someone is charged with something and the judge says in a more lenient act, I'll charge you with this lower one. Is the DWLS ever used as you were driving with a suspended license and you were going 3 times the speed limit, but in order to reward your good behavior or your compliance, we'll move it down to just a DWLS charge? Is it ever used in that manner?
Pam, can we get you on the microphone? Thanks.
Not typically in that capacity. There are different levels of DWS. He's talking about 3, a third degree, which is people who have not paid child support, have not paid tickets.
Got it.
And there are higher levels that are more serious. They're suspended for more serious matters, previous misdemeanors and things like that. That's a different, but no, we do see a lot of them tied to other tickets, but we don't usually amend down to that.
Okay, awesome. I think they were the quickest recommendations that or the ones that could be implemented sooner than ones like the FTE implementation suggestion, but the KPI implementation goal and the convening of the group to review DWLS and other charges like that. I think that it would be great for those to be done as soon as possible. I mean, it'd be interesting to just hear the workload that could be relieved if a charge like that was, I don't know, prosecuted differently.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Fisher.
So yeah, more on, I guess, D-walls and no-walls. My understanding is the D-wall, the third, would basically, the no-wall would take its place. Does that sound about right? The driving or operating the license, so no valid operative license.
Correct. And once again, we would have to do more analysis and discussion within our internal group, because there are circumstances where somebody might have a DWLS charge, but they also have a DUI charge. And in that case, there might be
one, probably, right?
Well, there could be multiple charges is what I'm saying.
Okay.
And in certain cases, there might be a situation where you do want to hold on to the DWLS 3 charge. You don't always want to get rid of those.
That's kind of what I was getting at. It kind of sounds like the no valid operative license would affect the D-walls 3, not the other ones that are more significant. That's kind of what I'm
No, the and just to as a reminder, the DWLS in the first degree and the second degree, they only make up combined about 1% of the total cases. 17%
were the
so correct. Yeah.
minor ones. So that's kind of where I'm going in my head. So I would also be okay with looking into that more. Replacing that, driving while license suspended, DWALs, something like that anyway, with the no valid operative license. I have a couple of questions. The jail charges, is there any way to not go to that jail and go to a different jail? There's got to be other jails. I know there's other jails around, and I don't know if some are cheaper than others. There's a rumor that Eastern Washington ones are cheaper. So when we look at these longer sentences, maybe being transferred over there for a lesser charge to us. I don't know if that is.
Yeah,
something
and
that's
that's
realistic or
that's
not.
something we can look into. That's part of that investigating
Okay.
alternative jail systems. I believe Sunnyside Jail is another alternative, but we do have to do that
Yeah,
analysis
Sunnyside
of
and Yakima, right?
the I
so.
believe so.
Right, I probably know way too much about jail. Never
So
been in it.
we would have to do more of the analysis, but there are potentially other options. But there's also other considerations beyond cost, the services we're being provided,
Mhm.
and that kind of thing.
And what's the main holdup for, you talked about people waiting in cells for trials. What's the main holdup for that trial? to
Yeah,
come up?
like I said, it's potentially a couple of factors. It's potentially as simple as when they were booked into jail. If they're booked into jail on that Friday,
Yeah.
they're going to have to wait Saturday, Sunday,
Yeah,
et cetera.
Like that was a small percent, was a bigger percent?
It
like
could
failure
be.
to appears?
The hard thing is we don't have data. There's no way to track why people are necessarily waiting for those jail days. We just don't have that data available.
Okay.
But other causes could be just less people are able to afford that bail. Yeah. So there's potential causes.
Yeah, Pam looks like she's really wanting to talk about this. No?
When a person is arrested and charged with a crime, they have to be afforded the top opportunity to have an attorney appointed and review the case. So that's why you see a little delay in their trial time, and we only have 60 days to take them all the way to trial. So it isn't too long. But that's why it's not instantaneous, like you're in, you plead, you get out. They always want to talk to their attorney, and the attorney always wants to do a little bit of research and communicate with the prosecutor.
So it'd be reasonable for like a 30-day sentence to go to 35 or 36 days, something like that, to wait for the attorney to review, or?
You know, every case is different.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I barking up the right tree though? Am I making sense to you? A little bit?
I think so.
Okay. And electric home monitoring, just for the record, I'm not a huge fan of that. It takes somebody who's irresponsible and then set them out so they can cut it off and go take off and do whatever they want. So I would rather look into probably different jails, or, as I said earlier, the D-walls and the no-vol suggestions that you have also. I think that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Walker.
The jail question, that includes the cost of one of our police officers driving them to the jail facility, is that correct?
The
But-
costs I have up here don't include that cost.
But generally, a Monroe PD officer would have to drive someone if they're booked from Monroe to Snohomish County Jail.
Correct.
It's
Yes, that
fascinating.
is correct. We're a full service organization, point A to point B.
Okay, thank you. I was just gonna asterisk my earlier point about convening the study on it. I just wanna, preface it with, I would love to see that come back to the council first. I don't even know if that's necessary to say, but I would just love to see the alternatives or the perspectives of the chief and the judge and staff, about the potential cost savings of that, weighed against the risks of potentially being more lenient on a charge like that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments at this time? Go ahead, Councilmember Fulcher.
Yeah, as I was listening to those comments, I definitely agree on finding a different jail for us to send people to. There's plenty of opportunities in Eastern Washington, and I think that's it's a way we can really spend less money on that. I also do not have a problem with changing the driving with license suspended down to the no, not properly. I can't remember yeah, I don't, such clever little acronyms that Fisher was using. So what he said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, anything further? So you're going to be pulling together some more information and coming back to the council at a later date to respond? Okay. All right, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and go on to the next item on the agenda then is council member reports. We'll go ahead and start off with council member Fisher.
I don't have a whole lot to report. I heard of, there was evidently a little bit of an accident with a scooter on a sidewalk the other day, running into a vehicle. So I kind of went through some of our, policies on that. And we might want to look at some of those a little bit or look at enforcement. Looks like I've fielded a few calls from people, pedestrians walking on sidewalks and having these scooters fly by them. And I don't know how that's actually going to look or how it's going to play out, but it might be worth looking at something and reviewing that. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Scarborough.
I would concur with a request from Councilman Fisher. I was parked down there today and a guy went by in one of those one-wheelers and it was across the street back the other way. But then also coming down the sidewalk was a young man on a bicycle, not going quite as fast, but equally as obtrusive to pedestrians. So I remember we talked about motorized scooters and whatnot some time ago. I don't know where it went, but maybe it needs to be looked at again.
Okay, thank you. We'll go ahead and take a note of that for something in an upcoming council meeting then for discussion. Councilmember Fulcher.
Thank you. Councilmember Hanford and I had a chance to visit with a person who lives on 179th and get her perspective on whether or not the traffic calming things that we've added in there have made a difference. I know that Jake is going to have some reports for us soon on the information on that, but it still seems to annoy people, the speeding up and the slowing down in order to speed up. I think it's just people's bad driving habits, but I look forward to the data to back that up. And that is all for tonight.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Fulcher. Councilmember Walker.
I just want to say thank you again to staff for your presentations and your write-ups in the packets. I can tell you guys put a lot of time into them and it's very appreciated. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councilmember Hanford.
Thank you, Mayor. Attended the Snohomish Waste Advisory Committee today, and they are in talks with Republicans are going to be in talks with the city about the rise in costs due to Snohomish County's rising costs. And also just a fee update for customers arriving with unsecured loads. They'll be assessed a $5 fee for vehicles, for small vehicles, and bigger vehicles is a $10 fee. Starting in January 1st, 2026, the fee is increasing to 20 and then 25 respectively. So basically everything's going up and we just have to do our best to secure your loads and save some money.
No. Yeah, you don't want your
About
money
it.
so you're saying you don't want your money going to waste?
Correct.
Okay.
That's good, Mayor.
Thank you. All right, anything further? All right. I'll stop while I'm behind. Next item on the agenda is item number 7. That's the mayor and administrative report, city administrative report, extended agenda, Administrator Knight.
Great. Thank you very much. Good evening, council. Looking forward to the next couple of council meetings. On Tuesday, the 28th, we do have a P3 committee scheduled. We will be covering Tierney Place and Oak Street Phase 3 design options reviews with Scott Peterson and Derek Hahn. And then a solid waste request for proposal review and options with Jacob Roberts and Megan Darrow. For the regular council meeting at 7 p.m., we have several announcements and presentations. We have a retirement acknowledgement for Sergeant Jason Southard, a swearing-in ceremony for Officer Nolan Hollingsworth and Officer Dane Munich and Sergeant Paul Henderson, and then a 2025 Outstanding Wastewater Treatment Plant Award. We have a public hearing that evening on the 2026 property tax and first reading of the ordinance, and then an executive session for potential litigation. On consent, we have accounts payable, meeting minutes, and the public defender contract. Under unfinished business, we'll have a further discussion of the 25-26 mid-biennial budget adjustment. And then under new business, wholesale rate analysis, the 2026 legislative priorities, and an ordinance and first reading of the stormwater utility tax. We have department reports, and then mayor and administrator reports, and an executive session for potential litigation.
All right. Anybody have any questions on the extended? Go ahead, Councilmember Walker.
Does the wholesale rate analysis, does that refer to water? Wholesale water rates?
Yes, that's water rates, wholesale water rate analysis. We can make that clarification in the extended agenda.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next item, which is City Administrator Report.
Thank you. I wanted to provide a kudos this evening and a shout out to Shauna Pena in our Streets Division. She got a shout out from our Parks Department for the work that she does, kind of moving from streets and into parks and giving a cleanup with leaves, particularly this time of year. It makes a real big difference. Shauna isn't somebody that we normally recognize at council meeting, and so I thought it was particularly important just to provide an opportunity and recognition for her and her work over collaboration and partnerships within the city. We have an auditor's entrance conference scheduled for October 28th, next Tuesday, 5:30 p.m. Please contact Jody if you plan to attend so we can announce council is meeting together. The purpose of that entrance conference is to introduce the audit team, explain the audit scope and objectives, and discuss the timeline and procedures with City Council. The auditors have been here. They're currently in the middle of their work, but an entrance conference is required, and so we're filling that requirement.
All right. Any questions for the City Administrator Report?
Oh, nope. So got mayor and council photos. I just took a pause.
My bad.
You
paused.
Because you paused.
Yes, sorry.
I wasn't looking. Mayor and council photos, December 9th or the 16th, starting at 5 p.m. There's a quick survey to fill out. Jody. There you go. Please fill out and let us know when you'll be available for those council photos. And then finally, we had a couple of questions regarding the AWC elected officials essentials for 2025. That is scheduled for Saturday, December 6th. They have a couple of options in person in Olympia. Bothell is the closest for live streaming, and then registration is open. So please notify Liam or Jody if you want to attend. Those not yet elected to office will need to register after November 4th.
All right. Pause. Any questions on the
Both of us will
report?
pause.
All right, thank you very much. Mayor's report. So one thing that, first, Monroe, this week's in your packet for your interest. One thing I'd like to draw your attention to is we did get a response back from Republic Services. This is in response to a letter that I sent a few weeks ago regarding the garbage and recycling and yard waste missed collections that occurred during the summer. I went ahead and handed out the letter to you earlier this evening. I don't know if you've had a chance to review it yet, but if it's something that the council finds acceptable, I would just be looking maybe for a motion to accept the terms of the letter that have been sent to me. Councilmember Scarborough, you can say so moved if you like.
It appears that they've given us what we asked for. Am I correct?
It reflects the letter that I sent, yes.
Then I would suggest that we accept it.
Okay, so is that a motion to accept the terms?
So spoken.
So spoken. Okay. All right, I have a motion from Councilmember Scarborough, a second from Councilmember Fulcher to accept the terms of this letter. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? All opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Thank you, everybody. We'll go ahead and we'll close the door on this chapter. What's that? Yeah, I was just turning to look at Jody. Jody, are you fine with the fact that we did that? I see that your mouth is telling me probably not. Okay.
Something against the procedures and you implicitly imply that you are waiving.
Is there a motion to retroactively waive our procedures? Oh, okay. 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 So I'm understanding it's okay to proceed with this, and I thank you all very much for your work on this. I think that's all that I have to add for today. And anybody have any questions for me? All right, seeing none, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item on the agenda. That's discussion items 8.1. This is the 2025-2026 Mayor's Recommended Mid-Biennial Budget Adjustment with Julie Elson
We're actually tag teaming.
and Administrator Knight.
Thank you.
Yes.
Next slide. All three of us have a role to play today. Jody's managing the PowerPoint presentation. I wanted to start off this evening by just providing council with an overview of the slides that we're going to be going through today, just so you have a general idea as we're working our way through them, kind of where we're starting and where we're going to end. And so the purpose of tonight's meeting is to share the details about the mid-biennial budget adjustments. We have several background slides, which I will cover, and then Julie will dive into the details and provide the council with additional information about the proposed amendments, some of the additional measures that the council can consider, and then finally kind of a set of recommendations at the very end. So next slide, we'll just go ahead and dive right in. So the budget modification, budget adjustment that we are presenting to council this evening is part of your biennial budget requirements. This is provided by state RCW and by city ordinance. And the mayor prepares the mid-by adjustment between August and December to be effective January 1st. It's an annual process. The last time the council looked at a mid-biennial budget adjustment, it was in 2023. We do one in 25, and then we'll do another one in 27, and so on. So this is an opportunity to make these adjustments in the middle of the council's 2-year budget. Next slide. So the timeline that you see in front of you meets the statutory requirements for the public hearings and all of the deadlines we need to meet. We have 2 primary deadlines. The first is that the property tax levy needs to be adopted this year by November 26th. And then the deadline to adopt your mid-biennial budget adjustment is December 31st, 2025. And so you can see that there are a number of associated actions that the council is going to need to take between now and the end of December. Next slide. When the mayor and senior leadership team were putting together the budget adjustment, we took a look at a number of goals that we felt were important to achieve as a part of this process. The first one is that we need to just true up the beginning and ending fund balances. That is something that we do as a part of every biennial budget adjustment. This year particularly, we need to address needs in the general fund, the facilities fund, and the parks CIP. We also want to meet the council's general fund reserve target per resolution 008-2015. By policy, city policy, the target for the general fund reserve is 17% or 2 months of operating expenses. We want to be sure that we are funding our non-discretionary expenditures And we've had increases in our legal expenses, left one medical, cost of living adjustments, and contract obligations. And so the mayor's recommended budget achieves the goal of filling those needs. We also amend every year as part of the budget process our capital improvement plan. This year, we are focusing on adjusting parks and public works projects. The city amends that CIP annually during the budget process. And then we wanted to focus particularly on maintaining core services. And we are doing that through a combination of both short and long-term adjustments. And then finally, our focus is on achieving long-term sustainability, fiscal sustainability. So we need to address this year an increase in the Everett wholesale water rates. The city purchases water from the city of Everett, and then we resell that water to our customers. And we'll be bringing back a resolution to make that water rate increase as a part of this process. And then finally, we need to prepare for the 27-28 budget. So this budget amendment is intended to set up that process to begin in early next year as we start to evaluate what are the council's strategic priorities and what are we going to do to achieve those while maintaining fiscal stability. So with that, I will finish with the intro slides, and I'll turn the rest of the presentation then over to Julie.
Thank you, Deborah. Good evening, council, mayor. Isn't it on? No. Okay, is that better? Yeah. Okay. So as part of the min by budget process, we look at updating the beginning fund balances based on actuals, and we also look at how our revenues and expenditures are performing. And based on this analysis, the mayor is bringing forward a budget amendment to balance the budget and account for all of those I just talked about. And so part of that, our beginning fund balance, I'll start with general fund modifications. And part of that is updating our beginning fund balance, which came in about 1.9 million less than what was projected. And I want to start out by saying that the general fund for 2024 was not over budget by any means. It was just our projections at the end of the year and looking at the difference between what was projected and what was actually spent at the end of the year. And those projections were higher than what was anticipated. And then accounting for these non-discretionary expenditures that are coming in over budget. And they're coming in over budget by about $1.4 million. And those include the left one medical expenses, legal fees, jail costs, and some contract obligations. And then we want to make sure that we meet our target reserve policy, which is 17% of our operating costs. Recommended budget modifications in the other funds includes our facility maintenance fund, which our projected ending fund balance of 2024 was 134,000 less than what was projected. So accounting for that and truing that up. And then in the fleet fund, we're recommending reducing transfers from the general fund, and this would defer vehicle replacements. For the Parks Capital Fund, we are adjusting the beginning fund balance to actual, and that actual beginning fund balance is about $400 less than what was originally projected. And then, as Deborah mentioned, in the water operating fund, we need to adjust our 2026 our water utility rate. We purchase water from the city of Everett, and they have increased our water rates to us 8.37% in 2025 and 6.59% for 2026. And then we are proposing a real estate excise tax transfer to the general fund to support our parks operations and maintenance. So I will get into these further on the next couple of slides. So the city, next slide. The city's target reserve is set by policy, and that policy states that we will have 2 months of operating expenses in our ending fund balance for the general fund. It excludes one-time expenditures as well as transfers. So our original projected reserve target was 3.6 million. Based on the reductions that we're proposing, as well as making sure all one-time expenditures are not included in that, it is decreased to 3.2 million, and that is our target. In addition, the city also has a contingency reserve goal, and that states that a minimum of 8% of general fund expenditures will be set aside. But again, that is a goal, not a policy. And state law sets a limit not to exceed of 0.375 per 1,000 of assessed value. So our policy also states that this will not be funded until the general fund reserve is met. However, the contingency reserve can be used to maintain unusual or its uses is maintained to meet unusual or catastrophic uninsured losses or to take advantage of unforeseen opportunities. Next slide. So I will go into the general fund mayor's recommended budget modifications first. Next slide. And those proposed budget adjustments ensures that we meet that reserve policy target of 3.2 million, which is also 2 months of our operating expenditures. It covers those non-discretionary expenditures, which are coming in about $1.4 million over budget. And it updates our, we have about $943,000 in our ending fund balance based on the current projected beginning fund balance and budgeted reserve revenues and expenditures. So we would use that towards meeting these other goals. And that puts us at a budget modification target of about 3.657 million to be able to meet these objectives. So what does this mean? Next slide. So our target is that 3.657 million, and we have 1.67 in contingency fund that we can use towards meeting that goal. And then we have came up with about 1.8 million in budget modifications or budget adjustments that can go towards that. And we would recommend transferring REIT to cover operations and maintenance in the general fund of about 490,000. This would leave us with a contingency reserve of about 348,000. And what this does is it maintains current staffing levels. It does keep current vacancies open until the end of the year, with December 31st of 2025. And this includes 2 managers positions, 1 in parks and 1 in finance, and 2 patrol positions vacant till the end of the year. And they are currently recruiting for those 2 patrol positions, but given how long it takes to get a patrol officer onboarded, we do not foresee them having somebody on board until the beginning of the year. This also accounts for new grant funding and ensures that grant funded services that we currently have programmed are maintained. And again, it uses the 1.67 million in the contingency reserve and uses the 490,000 in REIT revenue. And there's new legislation that passed that allows for us to use about 35% of REIT revenue to cover operations and maintenance costs. As part of that, though, we will be delaying the campus study and delaying the campus monument sign. And then this reduces essential contracted services such as economic development, communications, our state and federal lobbyists, and human services programs that are not funded through grants. Next slide, please. So going into the details of this budget modification adjustment a little bit further, it includes about 394,000 in salary and benefit costs, and that is for the finance manager, the parks manager, and the 2 police officers through 2025. It includes about $291,000 that is travel, training, and supply expenditures, and that is reductions across the city in those categories. It includes about 603,000 for those professional services contracts for economic development, human services, our state and federal lobbyists, and our communications contracts. And it recognizes grant funding for the police and court of about 209,000. Next slide, please. So, and then I will get into the budget modification recommendations for the other funds. Next slide, please. Starting with the real estate excise tax. And again, we would transfer about 490,000 to the general fund to cover operations. We would recommend increasing and passing through those ever water rate increases of 8.37% and 6.59%. And that is about an 11% rate increase to the city of Monroe. And in the Parks Capital Fund, we would be adjusting that beginning fund balance down by the $400,000. Our projected beginning fund balance was 1.9 million and the actual was 1.5 million. And so this will delay the North Hill Park and reduce funding for passive park acquisition, postpone the pros plan update until 2027, and design of the North Hill Park. And this will remove funding for security cameras and the park information signs. But it does also recognize they received 350,000 in a grant for the Rotary Field Park. So we will be including that. In the facilities fund, the beginning fund balance was $134,000 lower than forecasted. And so they will be reducing custodial services by about 50,000 and supplies by about 25,000. In the fleet fund, we are recommending reducing transfers from the general fund by 345,000. And this will delay vehicle replacements in the general fund, and it will primarily impact police and parks. Next slide, please. So if council was looking at fully funding the contingency, the mayor has additional measures that would get us to that. The first is the solid waste franchise fee. Council could approve a 2% franchise fee on our solid waste contract. That would bring in about $68,000 to the general fund. We could reduce FTEs, and for each full-time employee, that is about $160,000. We're currently looking at and analyzing traffic safety cameras, but currently the analysis underway, we are not sure if we would actually receive any revenue for that due to the costs associated with traffic safety cameras. We could look at and evaluate our permit fees and see if increasing those costs would bring in any additional revenue, and look at how our interfund transfers are developed. And that includes our fleet rates, our facility rates, as well as our
Information technology.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm searching for that word.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So, new legislation, House Bill 2015 was just passed, which allows council to approve a sales tax of 0.1% for public safety. However, it is still being developed. Those requirements to fill that are still being developed, and it puts a substantial amount of requirements on the police department. So we're still looking into what that really means. And then in 2027, we could look at doing a parks levy, which would be voter approved, and that would bring in about $500,000 to $1 million. Next slide, please. So again, our recommended budget adjustment, it maintains current staffing levels. It uses contingency fund of 1.32 million, leaving about $348,000 in that contingency fund. It holds those vacancies open through the end of the year and reduces discretionary spending on travel, training, and supplies. It reduces our professional services contracts for the economic development, communications, human services, and state and federal lobbyists. Uses $490,000 in real estate taxes to support general fund operations. And it addresses the 2.85 million variance in the water operating fund by adopting the 11% rate increase in 2026 to align with Everett's wholesale water rates. And it recommends postponing or reducing parks and facility projects to align with available resources, and reduces the general fund transfer to the fleet fund by the $345,000, which would delay fleet replacements, primarily in parks and police. Next slide. So, and then again, to go over kind of the timeline of the upcoming meetings. The next meeting, we will be coming back with our first public hearing with the budget adjustment, as well as the property tax levy and stormwater utility tax. At the November 18th meeting, we will have the second public hearing regarding the budget adjustment. We will adopt the property tax levy, adopt the stormwater utility tax, and adopt the water utility rate resolution. At the December 2nd meeting, we will adopt the 2025-2026 budget adjustment. I guess those are all recommendations, not, but they will be brought forward for
consideration.
action.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
Yep.
And so we do have a list of alternatives, and that would be adopt the mayor's recommended adjustment, which maintains the reserve targets, funds non-discretionary obligations, reduces non-essential contracts to zero, and balances the budget for 2026. Adjust contingency reserve use for contracts. Council may provide direction to the mayor and staff to return at the October 28th meeting with options to restore funding for council priority contracts by reducing the ending balance in the contingency reserve. Or you could modify transfers and allocations, meaning council may adjust the general fund transfer to the fleet fund or reallocate REIT and capital funding to reduce reliance on contingency reserves. Council could take no action, but without adjustments, the city's 2026 budget would not be balanced. Reserves would not meet policy targets, and contract funding decisions would remain unresolved. And that is all I have. So thank you. Questions?
All right. Staff and I have been working a lot to bring forward the proposal for you this evening. In the past, I've been able to come forward with both the reserves and also the contingency fully funded. As Julie pointed out, the way that the policy is written, it prioritizes funding the 17% reserves. The budget that we brought for you today, as Julie pointed out, is a balanced budget. It fully funds the 17% reserves, which is the first thing in the council's policy. And it does have about 345,000, was that the number, in contingency. And as Julie pointed out, it makes certain that we continue having the same positions that council has already approved for the biennium. However, it does reduce those outside contracts. And then, as you saw, also has some delay in purchases that would occur relative to fleet, and has some other impacts where those sorts of things could be funded again in the next biennium if the council so chose. So I'm just going to say thank you to the staff for all the work that they did to bring this forward. I know that it wasn't easy coming up with the different ideas for reductions and everything. I look forward to working with council to talk through the proposal, see what sort of adjustments the council would like to make. This is the council's budget. It's my recommendation as mayor, but at the end of the day, the budget is the council's budget, and I want to make certain that it meets your expectations. So turning to the council at this point in time, do you have any questions or thoughts? Councilmember Hanford and then Councilmember Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the excellent report. Yeah. A lot of hard decisions, right? Whenever we talk about money, it's hard, just like in our personal lives. Money's like one of the hardest decisions that people talk about in their personal lives. And so in a public life, it's all that much more, as it involves the lives of all of our employees, right? So these are hard talks, and but necessary. If you when you had the slide about all the different ways we could increase revenue, I'm not interested in. I just took down a few notes just to give my thoughts. Since you're looking for direction, I'm not interested in adding a solid waste fee. I'm not interested in doing any reductions to full-time employees of staff. And as far as the cameras, in my mind anyway, it was never about the money. So if we get revenue out of cameras for some reason, great. But I wasn't thinking that we were going to get into cameras for the money aspect of it. So those are my thoughts on some of those. I think it's going to be really important, as I already mentioned, about the garbage prices going up with the county, and now the water having to go up. I think it's really important that we communicate to our citizens that these are things that are out of our control. It's nothing that we are deciding, right? These are being dictated to us by Everett for our water and Snohomish County for our garbage. So we're going to need to really spread that word and do a good job of that. And so that's also another reason why I'm interested in doing a rise in the solid waste fee there. So, but yeah, I think I really like the first option. I think it's good to see that the contingency fund that we established years ago is going to be there. And yeah, love to hear other council members' thoughts too.
All right, thank you very much. Councilmember Walker, go ahead.
The Everett rate increases, do I understand or recall that these rate increases have occurred over the last few years, but the city has absorbed those costs and not passed it on to the residents? So, I mean, as Council Member Hanford was saying, the city's been doing what we can to prevent those increase in costs, the non-discretionary costs from reaching residents. And cutting expenses is never preferred. But I know that the adjustments were carefully considered and responsible financial stewardship by previous councils, staff, and the mayor have put us in a position where we've got the agility to make these adjustments without cutting full-time employees, without cutting essential services, and still maintaining our reserves fully funded and still having some contingency balance left over. I wish that I could explain to more people how lucky or well-positioned our city is financially relative to our community. It can feel like or not the community, but it can feel sometimes talking to other cities like the sky can be falling financially for a lot of them. And so every time someone asks me what it's like serving Monroe, I'm so grateful that we're in the financial position that we're in. And again, obviously this is not preferred. There are discretionary expenses that we would prefer to keep, obviously, but yeah, the increases in non-discretionary expenses as they have for all of us in our personal lives as well, whether it's insurance or groceries, you name it, we're all affected. And so I appreciate the work that was put into these adjustments. Julie, thank you. Mayor and Administrator Knight and to the staff. I appreciate you. And yeah.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fulcher?
Well said, both of you. I agree on so many things. I am so glad that we do have from previous council and from our longstanding mayor, we have the reserve and the contingency fund there for a reason. And that is why we are going to be able to make it through this. Using the contingency fund is the obvious choice here. Just like at home, I know that when I make less money, I eat more vegetables. So that's what we're going to do for a little while. Question, when it says reduce custodial service and that's going to save us 50 grand, is that a contract that we are currently using for a person? And it's not just something we can do a better job of picking up our own garbage or something like that. I'm just thinking, don't hire a housekeeper, clean your own toilets. The franchise fee on solid waste, I have no interest in as well, because that will just cost our citizens more. And I'm not interested in passing on more expense to them, especially with the upcoming garbage fee. Thank you, Kevin, for that. And also I have no interest in HB 2015, the 0.1% law enforcement tax. I do not want any more burden on our police department. It just seems like more hoops for them to go through for not a whole lot of money. I'm interested in less regulation there. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other comments? Go ahead. I'm going to go to Councilmember Fisher.
So yeah, I agree with just about everybody on that. Those items that came up about revenue streams, I'm pretty much in line with everybody else. The only one question I had, is there a way to alter the fleet fund where it doesn't affect police vehicle replacement and it affects other vehicle replacement instead? And that was just one of my questions.
Yeah, we can take a look because I know there was some conversation with staff about how much of that could actually just be non-police. So we'll take a look at that.
Great.
And then as I noted, there still is some money in contingency. So if necessary, an adjustment could be made perhaps to cover part of that difference if necessary. So yep. Yep. Thank you. All right, any other questions? Go ahead, Councilmember Walker.
Can you go back to the slide with the alternative revenue options?
Yeah. And I would note that the options, if you'll take a look at the last column, this is when you would evaluate doing them. So That's, some of this is for future reference, things that you could consider doing in the future. Some of these things we couldn't do in the short time that we have between now and the end of the year. So just for awareness, go ahead.
I was just going to emphasize the same thing in case this, if this meeting was reviewed, I just wanted to highlight that those are other options as well. The adjustments that are made in the packet don't include or require these other fees or options be adopted. So
That is correct. Thank you. I'm just going to turn to our finance director. That is correct, correct? Perfect. Yep. I just wanted to make certain that I had staff also concurring. Okay, any other discussions or questions on this? All right, so let's go back to the schedule, just again, so that we can take a look at this. Again, October 21st is budget adjustment discussion. And we'll come back on the 28th for first public hearing on the budget adjustment and the other items that you see there. And then November 18th, remembering November 11th is Veterans Day, and November 4th is Election Day, so we will not be having a meeting those 2 days. So November 18th will be the second public hearing budget adjustment and the other items. And then also finally for your consideration will be the adoption of the 2025-26 budget adjustment. If the council members have any questions over the next week or a couple of weeks, feel free to send an email off to Deborah. She'll make, and also copy me. She'll make certain that Julie gets it, and we can have responses to the questions that you have so that you're prepared. I thank you all very much. Again, I thank Julie, I thank Deborah, and I thank the SLT and the rest of the staff for all the hard work that you've done on this. And I think that's all we have for this evening. So unless there's objection, we will adjourn. Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Have a great week, everybody, and thank you for your service. We're adjourned. Smack the gavel.